So here we are, Chef Joel Stocks, LaRange, Portland, Oregon. A very fall day.
Yeah, very fall. Maybe the first real fall day.
First real fall day. And we were just discussing about, as we enter this time of year, the fun, the creativity that goes with that.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk a little bit about influences, like where, or inspirations, not just, I know you're a seasonal guy.
Yeah.
And local, and you go for all the things. And that's why we're having this conversation.
For sure.
But yeah, some of those influences or inspirations for things. Where is there a playlist or a something? Or is there
I wouldn't say there's a playlist. When I look at a menu and how I develop all of them, I usually am vegetable focused first. That's how you kind of write out your chart, is start with this, then that's what seasonality is usually vegetable driven. And I kind of see it as a skeleton that you're plugging in the center and then adding these pieces to it and kind of building it from there. I would say some of my biggest influences would be my time in French Laundry would be one of them in terms of how you think about flavor connections. And then with Holdfast, my prior restaurant, I basically have 7 years where we were changing the menu every single week. So when people nowadays see some dishes, then they're like, where did you come up with those connections? They seem super out there, weird. To me, I'm like, these make sense because I can look back on years of how they've been built and how I know that they're going to work together, even if I've never actually tasted them together in that complete dish before. Just over a year. Yeah, just over a year. We opened, we had quite a few soft openings to start. So our exact date that we opened is kind of up for debate. But last July is when we pretty much opened. So yeah, I see that.
Did he call you? Did you call him?
He called me. So he knew that the space that we're in at LaRange here, he knew that it was coming up, that the restaurant that was here prior was going to close and that they were looking for somebody to take over. What's hilarious is I'd never actually been up here before, even though Holdfast, the last version of it, was a block and a half down the street. So he called me. He was like, "Come meet me here. Let's check it out and walk through." And as soon as you walk up the stairs and feel the creakiness of the floors and get that inviting feeling, it really does feel like you're coming into somebody's home, somebody's connection. And for me, it made it even more exciting because I had been spending the last couple of years after during the pandemic, running a little very underground pop-up series called Gem with my wife. That was just out of our garage at home. So that was truly the epitome of welcoming people into your home to share a very fancy dinner, but it was basically a dinner party. And so to have a restaurant that could be even more approachable, more people could come through it. We only did 8 people a night at Gem, our supper club. Here it's like, okay, now we have a bigger audience, but we're still going to have the feeling that you're coming in to our home to, a warm, inviting spot. And that's kind of what the starting ethos of LaRange was.
That name.
The name, exactly. So that's.
Are you a Beavers fan?
Oh no, I'm actually 3 generations of Duck over here, so I'm not a Beavers fan. It's always hard when you're coming up with a name for a restaurant in general, and so we went in circles for months over what the final name LaRange would be. And actually, one of the funny things we just threw it out was like, what if it's just orange and the door is painted orange and that's it.
Right.
Then we circled back onto it, after weeks and kept coming back and like, you know what, that kind of actually, why not? So make it LaRange. That's the food that we want to do. The overall wines, we mainly want to draw from French Mediterranean influences. So that's why it's LaRange, not just orange. And then just the inviting feeling of the dining room. It honestly has, LaRange just has a warmth to it in terms of a word, in terms of a phrase. And so it kind of interwove itself through everything we do. And then Jeff's obviously great. He does all of our interior design. So he has all these touches of orange Le Creuset lids, orange wallpaper throughout the place, and all these small little touches. We have steak knives that have orange handles. So that's just fun ways to really drive home the the ethos. Exactly. There is the skin contact wine situation for sure. But it's nice to have the warmth, especially when we've got so much overcast, cloudy outside.
One of the things that I appreciate about this role that I have now, stepping away from, stepping out of the kitchen and coming down, coming out of all that, is wanting to tell that story that people, I think now more than ever, want to hear those stories and what's behind it, and what's going on, and what's going on in that little restaurant in my town. Well, that little restaurant in my town is L'Orange, and that's what's happening here. And in a town with some magnificent people, and we were talking about that earlier too, just this camaraderie here. But it's so fortunate you said, yes, let's do this. Let's go full bore. I don't mind being on camera. I don't mind being audio and, getting in print so people can hear that story of the influences. And then that leads us to, do you know where you want to go with it? Or are you just kind of, what does the future look like? Is it?
At the core, I would say what I set out to do with L'Orange is cook food that I want to eat all the time. And that sounds simple, but it's actually one of the hardest things to do from a chef restaurant side. Is I'm trying to not cook chefy food. I'm trying to cook literally just what I would like to eat all the time. And so that is where I hope the future of L'Orange continues, is that even with outsider influence, like getting on the Times 50 list, like that's huge and that's amazing. I don't want that to change what we are doing and what we're after. So at the core of whatever our future is going to be, I want to keep that nugget of like that was the mission statement. So let's keep doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, orange the color and the home feel, and as you read about things, it's welcome to my home and here's what we want to do, and even the way that the food's presented, that your intention and your love and your creativity, and I'm just going to say it, your joy is just clear in all of those things and all of the touches. And it's just, it's really, really cool. We've hit a couple different things, but if it has to touch back on something or expand, what is something you would like the people to know? Is there, a memory or a moment that you went, aha, I want to be a chef. This is what I want to do. Or, any of those kind of things. Is there something that is not going to get asked in an interview, but we're going to do it because we do things a little differently?
For sure. Well, that is actually, my origin in a chefdom is it can be written to a specific point in time. Was when I was in 6th grade and I read a book, and it was Michael Ruhlman's Making of a Chef. And I decided at that point, I want to go to the Culinary Institute of America as a 6th grader. I read his follow-up book, which was The Soul of a Chef. So I was 12, 13, and I was like, I'm going to work at the French Laundry. And I did both of them by the time I was 18. And that was kind of I didn't have any other track mind of where my career route was going to go. It was pretty straightforward. So
that's pretty cool. And that ability to work with some of those people at a time, that, just being a sponge kind of in a way, like, okay.
Jumping right into the deep end. Absolutely. I started working when I was 15 at the restaurant down the street from my parents' house. And that was, 15-year-old little line cook you don't always see that. And that was like get off school early so I could go work extra at the restaurant. So that was kind of, I already knew restaurants, but I had never jumped into that intensive environment before. So.
What's something not everybody knows that you want them to know?
That's a tricky question. My favorite thing to still eat is probably Kraft macaroni and cheese at night.
There you go.
So we haven't put that on the menu, but that is something I might go and eat after a show.
Fall just started today, so there's time. When you when you think about, you were talking about, starting from a vegetable, kind of plant-based first, which I think is really great. And I think it's, in today's culinary world, restaurant world, whether it be the NA and the mocktails, whether it be the plant-based thing and paying attention to dairy and gluten and all those things. It's great to hear you say that I kind of start there and then I work towards where I want to go, and that you have that vision for it. Do you draw them out on the paper? Do you just have it in your head? Do you have that? I know what I want this to look like.
I do write them. I write them out. I don't do drawings. My doodles are pretty terrible. So, but I will write lists and chart it out of, this is the skeleton, like I mentioned before. This is the list of, and it works for both the a la carte menu, but even especially with the tasting menu, it's like each line, that's the course. I know how the flow of the dinner is going to need to be. So I know these slots that I need to fill in that are a certain level of intensity and flavor, because that's the whole thing with the tasting menu. You don't hit them over the head with every course. You have to have it flow properly. So you start there and it's like, I know where to plug in this one. So then I work on the second one and kind of play around with it that way. It's almost like a little Tetris board that you're working on. And I try not to repeat ingredients, or if they're repeated anywhere on the menu, it's minimal. So that's another one. It's like, that's where the Tetris pieces come. It's like, oh, I really want to use this, but I already used it up here. So how do I block this out and then still wind up at the end result of the dish that I wanted in the first place?
Sourcing.
Yeah.
Do you have your favorites?
I do. Groundworks Organics. We've been working with them forever. Flying Coyote Farm. They do awesome. I mean, if we're hitting the prime time of all of their chicories, and they're the best at that. And so that's always fun. When I can, they actually just moved their farm. But when we first opened, my cousin, who's down in Grants Pass, we were getting pigs from them, which is really awesome that I could be, this is my family farm down there, and they're just bringing me up a pig whenever they have it. It's not a large farm at all. It's just a really small group, and so it'd be even that more special to work with it and put that on the menu as a special. Excitingly, they actually moved closer to town. They're up in the St. Helens area now, and are moving the farm with them. So So after a brief hiatus, as they get settled and all the animals settle back in, speaking of the future, that'd be one of the things that I look forward to, is getting to use much more of their animals.
That's awesome. And you hit the other part of the question of like, what things are you looking for, as we are in an obvious seasonal change now? And
another funny one is in terms of it's, our meat purveyor. My purveyor is actually a guy that I went to elementary school with. His dad was the chef of the first restaurant I worked at that I was mentioning, and he worked in kitchens too. And now he's my meat rep. When I need something special, I'll call him up and be like, "What kind of deal can you get me, Jason?"
I mean, it's community. It's all about community, and the things we do for the community, the things that is the community. And it's just such a, one of the reasons we love looking at the pillars of the regenerative, organic certifications and all these things, is it's right in there. It's not just Mother Earth and the plant, animal, whatever, but it is taking care of each other and the people. And that's something that rings very true, again, for what you and Jeff have done. And it was a clear intention for, the people, whether it's the serving staff or, the kitchen crew or what's going on. The inclusion, it's not just, here's my show, let's talk about this. But that is so well conveyed. And I think it is something very, very special. And for those of us who've been here, or been able to eat in some of the other places from the past. And for those who haven't been here, you got to do it. New York Times wasn't wrong. Not at all. I think, really, those were just some of the things, just want to have kind of an open conversation. Yeah. We do things a little bit different. And it's those stories and those getting to know someone a little bit more, like what's happening and why. And builds up to that full-fledged story of why this is important and why someone would be interested. Yeah, it's amazing, and it is intentional. It is creative. It's full of those things that clearly you have followed something that you wanted to do, as you said, from 6 years old, and here you are, and here it is. So congratulations on all those things and all of that stuff, and here's looking forward to what happens next, Chef. Yeah, and thanks for agreeing to do this, man.
Absolutely.
This is exactly this is the exact kind of thing that Edible Portland's about. It's just we want to tell these stories and bring it in and do that kind of stuff. So, yeah, cool. Thank you, Chef.
Perfect.